The 556th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Got it! Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down one. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! He got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Goss.
Comes in. Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he tucks it down for the 5-point lead. Matthews off the mark. And this year the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome to another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh Anthony here with you guys once again today. Here to talk about the latest transfer that Carolina has shown interest in that got some negative reaction last night when we put the article up, and shared it into the Facebook groups and even got some reaction on Twitter about it as well. So we're here to talk about the latest transfer portal target for Carolina. And then we got some ACC scheduling news to talk about, as earlier this week, the conference made the decision to reduce its league schedule down from 20 games to 18 games in an effort to really make to really put themselves in a better position, if you will, to put more teams into the tournament. And this was a necessary move, but it does come at a cost for Carolina, as a team that we play twice a year, we no longer will play once or twice every season. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. First, we'll do our pod thought of the day. We go to legendary coach Dean Smith for that pod thought. That thought is, quote, "I do believe in praising that which deserves to be praised." A lot of praise has come Hubert Davis's way this offseason for what he's done in the transfer portal, already adding 5 guys to the roster for next season. You've got a top 10 prospect, the McDonald's All-American, joining the roster as well. In addition to bringing back Seth Trimble, a guy that felt like a very important piece for the team to have on the roster for next year if they want to compete for an ACC championship and advance deep into the NCAA tournament. But the work is not done. Carolina has a need. They need to add a wing. We talked earlier in the week how that search has taken them internationally. And there was a couple guys from overseas that they were showing interest in. They got back in the portal, though, yesterday, as it was reported by Joe Tipton of On3 Sports. Carolina has expressed interest in Texas Tech transfer Devin Cambridge, who wasn't awarded a medical hardship from the NCAA, granting him a 7th season of eligibility at the college level. He spent time at Arizona State, Auburn, and most recently with the Texas Tech Red Raiders. And for his career, nothing that's going to stand out, that's going to wow you. He's a career 8.2 point per game scorer with 3.8 rebounds, 0.6 assists on 44% shooting and 29% shooting from behind the 3-point line. With all that being said, though, I was not prepared for, I guess, the negative backlash that I saw last night from the fan base. A lot of comments from Carolina fans that were completely disinterested. Basically saying he's not good enough to play here. If he's trying to play a 7th year in college basketball, that really shows you that he doesn't have potential to be a pro basketball player. And a bunch of just wide-ranging thoughts and topics. So when you see that Carolina is being interested in Devin Cambridge, a guy that's going to be looking to play his 7th season of college basketball, what stands out to you initially about the latest transfer portal target for Hubert Davis and Jim Tanner?
Well, I think the reason that a lot of people are probably concerned is because they look at the last 2 years at Texas Tech and see that he played in just 14 games and only started 10 of those. But I think the big part of it is that, the injuries have really taken a toll on him. To me, it's a shot in the dark, man. This is one of those guys that you're picking up and you're hoping he turns into something. If he doesn't, then it's not the biggest deal in the world. You've got the extra scholarships for a reason. And I think that's how Carolina would potentially look at this. This is, another guy that's going to be a bargain for Carolina. We talked about Jaden Young and how Carolina was able to get him and what he added. I think this would be a similar move. This is a guy that, you look at the scoring prowess, it's not necessarily the highest, but I mean, back at Arizona State, the last full season that he was healthy, he averaged 9.8 per game. He shot 50% from the field and he shot 33% from three. So I think this is somebody that could help Carolina a little bit. It's not going to be someone that's coming in here, taking over that starting role automatically and is going to be an all-conference caliber player, which I think is what people are really hoping for. I think that's what their expectation is that Carolina is going to get some game changer. Well, guys, I don't think that person exists in the transfer portal right now. All those guys have gone to different schools, or the majority of them that Carolina, could be interested in, guys like RJ Lewis and Jameer Watkins, those are guys that are in the NBA draft. And I mean, look, I think because they entered their names into the portal, you can talk to them. I wouldn't doubt if Carolina has had conversations with their agents saying, look, if they do end up pulling out of the NBA draft, we would certainly be interested. But I think that Carolina's got to find some guys that they can add to this roster at that wing spot. Really, you just need the one guy, and this might be the guy that you go with there, and then you choose which lineup you want to roll with. So I don't really get the backlash to it, because I'm going to tell you that if you go with the international guys, which seem to get less pushback, especially if you go with Ivan Karchenkov, I mean, there's a risk there. There's an inherited risk there that, he is not going to be the same player that we saw playing at the lower level in the Euro Leagues before he played at the highest level of the Euro Leagues last year. Nothing about these guys are guaranteed. So to me, it just doesn't make sense why there's such panic about this move from Carolina fans, because you need bodies at that spot. And, this is one that has played, at the highest level of college basketball at 3 different spots, and has, had some decent success. Nothing great, but it had some decent success just about everywhere that he's been. The biggest thing is I guess maybe you're worried about him staying healthy, but to me, I think it's still worth a shot here for Carolina if they can end up bringing him in.
And so low risk, high reward type of guy. Because you with the injuries, you don't know what version of a basketball player that you're getting. I'll say this though, he got injured both years at Texas Tech. It was viewed as a big loss for the Red Raiders. And whenever people would talk about the job that Grant McCaslin's done with that program, they would reference the injuries that they've had to overcome, and his name would be mentioned, in the list of guys that team had lost in each of the last 2 years when they far and away exceeded expectations. I think you love the fact that he's a power conference player, 3 different stops. So it's not like he's had to come up or go down from the power conference level. No, he was recruited to play the power conference level and has transferred twice to play in power conferences. I think that's something that Hubert Davis values as well. And so, and then you look at the financial component. I don't think that this guy is in a position to demand a lot of money. And we don't really know where Carolina is financially. Some will tell you that they're tapped out. Some will tell you that they still have resources at their disposal if they needed them. And I think that's believable because of them getting in the sweepstakes for Andrei Stojakovic. But I think Carolina fans have to adjust their mindset. Like, once you missed on Stojakovic, you were not going to add a player of his caliber out of the portal the rest of the offseason. If you go overseas and you bring in Ivan Karchenkov, you're bringing in a guy that's got a similar skill set. His game kind of mirrors him in a lot of different ways, but you still haven't seen him produce at the college level like you saw with Stojakovic. And so I think that's where I think a lot of the negative reaction is coming from is Carolina made this strong push to get in a position to get the most coveted transfer on the wing position the past couple of weeks, and they missed out on him. And this is where they're circling back around to, and these two guys are not in the same stratosphere. But that's just the reality of the portal, man, especially when you're still looking to add this deep into the process. And you can't really hold out hope that Drake Powell is coming back because the only way that's going to be possible is if he tanks at the NBA draft combine, which we'll find that out starting tomorrow when that gets underway in Chicago. So, I'm not saying that I love Devin Cambridge and that I am, 100% sold on him, but you could see why this would make sense from a lot of different reasons that I think Carolina fans got to broaden their horizon with. Like, where the fifth-year transfer thing is over. Like, you're not adding fifth-year transfers anymore. We've seen how valuable age and experience has become in college basketball the last couple of years. You had a guy that's playing in his seventh year of college basketball. That's going to benefit you in a lot of ways because he has seen a lot and has been around a lot. And his body would just be physically more developed than some of the guys you're playing against that are 18, 19, even 20-year-olds. And so I think there's just a lot of moving parts that come with Devin Cambridge. I think the shooting numbers play a factor in it too, because if there's one thing that you could question about Carolina so far this offseason, and with the guys that A, they've landed, and B, they've targeted, outside of Kai and Evans, I think Jonathan Powell does have the potential to be a really good shooter. They have not added a knockdown shooter, a guy that is going to show up and shoot 38% or better from behind the three-point line. We've identified this as a point of need for this roster moving forward. I think that also plays a part in the negative pushback around him. As you look at his shooting numbers, and they're not going to impress you. They're not going to wow you from behind the three-point line, where his best percentage when he played a full season was 34%, and that was back during his freshman year of college basketball. So a lot of moving parts here, but I do think this is someone that emerges as a legitimate prospect for Carolina to land. You need to be open-minded because I do think he could do more good than harm if he's playing for UNC in 2025, 2026.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is at this position, you're just kind of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. And Cambridge could be one of those guys that does end up sticking. You mentioned it was a big loss when they lost him this past year to an injury, or not this past year, actually back in 2023 when they lost him to the injury at first. He was expected to be a big part of what they did. And was off to a pretty solid start. Wasn't shooting great from beyond the arc, but still was averaging 10.5 points per game and 4.5 rebounds per game. And so, last year was spent with him trying to get back on the court after he tore his knee up. Most people did not expect him to be back at the start of the regular season. He was, but some people believe that he was, sort of rushed himself back to get back on the court. And that's part of the reason why he only played in 6 games. And then he ended up entering the portal or not entering the portal at that time, but leaving the program and applying for a medical hardship. And so, I mean, I don't know what version of this guy you're getting. I think that's part of the risk that Carolina is taking here. Are you getting the guy that, showed some potential at Auburn, flashed at Arizona State, and that's the reason why he eventually landed at Texas Tech? Yeah, you could certainly get that guy. You could also get a guy that struggles a little bit. One of the articles that I read said that the game was moving a little too fast for him early on last year. That's what it looked like out there. But again, that could be from him rushing back from that injury. So you're just hoping that, he's back to being the guy that he was when he was at Arizona State and what Texas Tech thought they were getting in him back in 2023. And if you can get that guy, then that's someone that can help you. As of right now, the guy that you would look at as probably the starter at the 3 if they want to go with a more traditional lineup. And if they want to play Caleb Wilson at the 4, you're probably looking at Jonathan Powell as being your starter on the wing. And we talked about it. He's a guy that started in the Big 12 this past year, but ideally he would be a guy that's coming off the bench for you. I think Cambridge is probably the same type of player. And that's okay, with where Carolina's at right now. You could still be critical of Carolina for not getting someone to fill the shoes of Drake Powell in terms of being a starter. And I think that's okay. But I think now you've got to come to the reality that this is what's out there. It's either him or you got to pray that you can find a way to get one of the international guys. And, the thing is, we talked about Ivan Karchenkov last week. We haven't heard anything on him since then. So we have no idea how that's going. This is a guy that has experience playing D1 basketball. So I'm not saying that he's a better option than Karchenkov because I think there's more upside for a younger guy. 18 years old. Clearly, there's a lot more upside for him than there is for Cambridge. But I do think that this would give Carolina another veteran in that room, which isn't necessarily the worst thing. Carolina's got some young guys, some guys that haven't played the types of roles that maybe Carolina is going to be expecting them to play. So having a veteran like this, someone that's been through a lot, could certainly bode well for Carolina from a leadership standpoint if they're able to bring him in. So hold off on the panic, folks. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world that Carolina is going after him. And again, it just shocks me that this is such a big position of need. People have been pointing this out for the last couple of weeks, how they desperately need someone at this 3 spot. They go out and are interested in someone at the 3 spot, and now all of a sudden we're concerned that he's not good enough and we shouldn't take him on. It just doesn't make any sense. This fan base is dying to be critical of every move that this basketball program is making this offseason. And sometimes you got to be able to find the silver lining in some of these pickups, especially when it's this late in the transfer portal window.
I guess the big question that we have to talk about between ourselves here is, would you rather add a guy like Cambridge, or did the interest in the international players, primarily Ivan Karchenkov, is that where you shifted your focus towards? Because if I had to pick between one or the other, I'm picking Ivan Karchenkov, a guy that's played professional basketball overseas, would show up and kind of already know how to be a pro. And I think would make the adjustment to life here in the States, life in the Carolina basketball program. I think he'd make that transition very, very easily. I also think, though, because this is a guy that has played 4 years, overseas, he's probably going to demand more money. And so does Carolina want to get, offer him the same financial package to come over here and play basketball that he would probably want to demand and expect with the money that he's already made while playing over there for Bayern Munich. So I know that's where I am. Like, if I had to pick between Karchenkov, Sarr, or Cambridge, I'll take the international upside over a 7th-year guy that is coming off injuries that have basically wiped away the last 2 seasons. Is that where you're at? Because I think that's where the fan base kind of got to with the report of the Karchenkov. There was a follow-up report where it appears that interest is very mutual, and that he's very interested in coming over here to prepare for to get into the NBA at some point. So would you rather go the international route, or would you rather stick to the college route and bring in a guy that at least we have seen him produce at the power conference level here playing college basketball?
Yeah, no, I would much rather go with the international players because both guys are much younger than Cambridge is. They don't have the injury history that Cambridge has. So that's the reasons why I would go. with them. I don't think it's that far off. I don't think there's that big of a gap, because you're talking about guys that, when they stepped up to that next level and were playing professional basketball with the highest level of talent, they struggled a little bit. They didn't play nearly as much. But I do think that there is still way more upside for them. There's more potential that they could turn into something. And, there's more years that they're going to be at Carolina. This is a 1-year pickup here, where Karchenkov could be a guy that at the age of 18, I think he might be 19, he's going to have more eligibility at the college level. He's going to be able to come in, play for Carolina for a few years, and that will really allow him to grow and blossom into a player. And look, even if he doesn't end up blossoming into that player, there's always the option for him to leave, or for you to basically put his name into the transfer portal if you have somebody else that you like better in the future. But it gives you more protection down the line. It gives you someone that you're going to have for a few years. Where Cambridge, again, you're talking about, to me, the advantage for him is that he would bring some leadership to the table. He would bring a veteran presence to the table for Carolina. But yeah, I'd much rather go with the younger guys if I had to choose. What route do I think they're going to have to go? I think because we haven't heard much from the Karchenkov side of things, I think there's a good chance that this is a pivot move, because they're not necessarily thinking that Karchenkov is going to be coming anytime soon.
All right, so that's our look at the latest transfer portal target that Carolina has gotten involved with. His name is Devin Cambridge, coming from Texas Tech, has played at Auburn and Arizona State as well. For more on him, you can find our article at HeelToughBlog.com. Now we got some big picture college basketball news to talk about that directs Carolina directly and I guess indirectly as well. Earlier this week, the ACC is moving back to an 18-game conference slate, which will start for the upcoming basketball season. So we don't have to go through another 20-game schedule. This will begin this upcoming year. They adopted the 20-game model back in 2019, 2020. It was shortened to 1 year due to the COVID pandemic, but this is something that's been talked about here recently in an effort to really, and while you're taking away ACC games, but to really elevate the conference, because the bottom of the conference has held this conference back. And we saw with Carolina, with the way that the league played out this year, when they won 9 of 11 games to close the regular season, could not pick up a quad one win in the midst of their run to make the NCAA tournament. Virtually unheard of in the SEC, the Big Ten, and the Big 12. So we're going back to 18 conference games. And the real big talking point around this is how they're going to schedule those 18 games, where Carolina was playing, a handful of schools every single year, home and away. Carolina will now just play one school on a every year basis, home and away. Obviously, that's going to be the Duke Blue Devils. And then there will be another opponent that they play home and away, but it will not be a constant opponent. That opponent will rotate, meaning that we will not play NC State twice every year, like has been like that's been the case since the league conference schedule expanded from 16 to 18 games, and then from 18 to 20 games. So they'll play Duke twice, they'll play another ACC program twice, and then there'll be 7 home games and 7 road games against against a single opponent. When you hear that news, when you hear the fact that the conference is dialing back its schedule from 20 to 18 games, what do you make of that? And then what do you make of the fact that the Carolina State rivalry, the Carolina State matchup, whatever you want to refer to it as, one that has a lot of history and tradition in this conference, will no longer be played guaranteed twice every year? What comes to mind when you hear that said out loud?
Yeah, you hate it. I mean, this is a rivalry that, most people, it's the running joke that Carolina and State's not a rivalry. How can it be a rivalry when Carolina has dominated the series so much? And yeah, I've used that myself quite a few times, especially when you got Roy Williams, who was 33-5 against NC State all time in his career. Just dominated them. But at the same time, this is a rivalry that is important for the ACC. This is one that, sort of brings back that nostalgia. And we thought, okay, we're going to be getting back to some of that nostalgia here in the next few years because they made a hire that is really, really good, at least on paper. We think that Will Wade is going to be able to work out there. You see some of the guys that he's already brought in through the transfer portal. One guy that they're wanting to bring in, which is one of the best guards in the entire country, and PJ Haggerty. That would have been one of those teams that you would look at and say could have been this year's Louisville. Maybe not nearly that successful, but still a team that could challenge to be one of the top 3 teams in the ACC this upcoming season. And now, Carolina, moving forward, won't be able to play them multiple times a year. Clearly, I don't love it, but I think this is just where the ACC is at, and it shows you how sad of a state the ACC actually is in, that they need to shorten the conference schedule to be able to have a better chance of making it to the NCAA tournament, because they believe that the conference is so weak that it actually hurts their teams. That's a sad state of affairs for the ACC. So I think it's going to take time getting used to that. Carolina's most years going to be playing them once. I would like to see it where Carolina plays them, twice, a little more often than some of the other opponents on the schedule, if they can build that in. I doubt they're going to do that, though. I think it's just going to be a complete rotation. And it means that, this rivalry that had a chance to get back to being one of the best in the ACC, maybe the best in the ACC behind Duke, Carolina, I think now you have to question what is it going to look like moving forward. There's still going to be that animosity, especially when they meet once a year, but it certainly is not going to be the same as what it could have been. And that is just another blow to an already dying ACC.
Yeah, I think this is, first off, the move to go from 20 to 18 games, the correct move. And I think you'll see more conferences because they'll follow what the SEC does. The Big Ten, I believe, plays 20 games. I believe they play 20 games. I think you'll see them dial it back. If it's not the Big Ten, I know the Big 12 does. I think you'll see them push it back to 18-1 just because, it's just oversaturated. And every league has schools that are at the bottom of the conference that are hurting the league. The ACC is doing this in large part to force the hand of these schools to play premier games in the non-conference. Which, I think for the most part, Carolina traditionally does a good job of that. You look at Duke's schedule for this upcoming season, they'll be ready to get to ACC play, so they actually play some easy games because John Shire has flipped the script from what Coach K did all those years. They're playing anybody and everybody they can, home, away, neutral court, wherever. We'll see if the other programs in the ACC follow suit. But the ACC got it wrong when it came to how they're going to schedule North Carolina. And I know this is going to sound like, pinky out Carolina fan, but Carolina should have been given special treatment with how their schedule came together because of the fact that they are a part of the 2 most storied rivalries in the conference. The 2, the most ranked on ranked matchups in the history of college basketball, North Carolina and Duke. The second most ranked on ranked matchups in college basketball, North Carolina and NC State. And there's a wide gap between those 2, but Carolina's involved in both of those. And especially at a time where it does feel like NC State is on the verge of becoming a legitimate program again with the hire they made in Will Wade, with the investment they've made in NIL, that this rivalry could return to the forefront of ACC hoops and maybe even the national landscape like it was in the 70s and the 80s. The fact that it's not going to be played twice a year is shameful. And it's another example of Jim Phillips not being able to do his job 100% to the fullest, because to think that their primary rival is Wake Forest for NC State is laughable. There's no one here that hates that hates Wake Forest, like not from a rivalry standpoint. Carolina fans, Duke fans, let alone NC State fans. And so, I don't think anyone would have gotten upset if the ACC said, hey, we're doing this, but North Carolina is going to be the only school that has 2 teams they play every year home and away, and there will be 2 teams they will not play every single season. I don't think anyone would have gotten upset at that, especially if NC State becomes a relevant program again, and we're only getting that matchup once a year, because State hasn't been relevant in our lifetime, hardly ever. And those are 2 of the better atmospheres you see during the season, when we go to their building and then when they come to our building. And now that's going to be devalued. So it'll make for a great sense of urgency the one time they play, whether it's in Chapel Hill, whether it's over there in Raleigh. Maybe that gets made up for the fact that they'll play a lot more in the ACC tournament moving forward. But I hate this move. And I wish they just would have been willing to do what was right for North Carolina and for NC State to have those 2 programs play twice a year. The bigger story, and another big story that comes out of this, is how does this affect Carolina's scheduling? Because if you look at North Carolina's schedule and the way it's coming together for the upcoming season, it's nowhere near as daunting as it was this past year, when I predicted them to go undefeated in non-conference play. One of my worst predictions of all time. The schedule isn't fully complete, but you're not going to see a lot of ranked opponents either coming to Chapel Hill or Carolina seeing them on a neutral floor. But the ACC is doing this in hopes that their conference schedules premier games against other premier programs from premier conferences. The SEC has done it. We saw what they did last year. They ran through the ACC and the ACC-SEC Challenge. Do you expect Carolina, now with the schedule a little bit more open with 2 less conference games, to maybe schedule the way that we're used to seeing them schedule, trying to play the best programs the sport has to offer?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, you're trying to sort of game the system. I think that's really what Carolina's trying to do. And I think this past year, you got to look at Carolina, what happens when you play the incredibly difficult schedules that Carolina has been playing. It leads to, a situation where when you lose some of these games, you lose confidence and Carolina starts to struggle a little bit. I don't think that means that Carolina's schedule is going to be one of the easiest in the country by any stretch. But what we've seen already, especially for this upcoming season, is that Carolina is going to have some more games at home, some games that are going to allow them to establish a little bit of an early season rhythm, something that, has been really difficult with the way that Carolina has scheduled before. So I think this creates opportunity. I still encourage Carolina to look and fill those 2 spots with Power 4 competition, but maybe these are some of the easier Power 4 teams that will allow you to play the game at home and make things a little bit easier. Like, this is not, where Carolina should be looking to add 2 more gauntlet games, where each year they should be looking to add 2 ranked opponents. I don't think that's probably the smartest thing to do with how the net works nowadays. But, I mean, yeah, if you schedule a team from the SEC or you schedule, a team from the Big 12, something like that, at least one of the games that gets freed up by that, let's make that an opponent that it has some sort of meaning to it, because I think that could certainly help Carolina along the way. Because, yeah, we've seen it this year. They're not going to be in one of those normal holiday tournaments. They're going to be in a showcase where they will play 2 opponents, but one of them is one that really isn't going to help your resume. The other is one that will help your resume out a little bit. So I think this is, with this move, now Carolina's in more control of what their schedule ends up looking like. And hopefully, Hubert Davis and the staff, sort of take advantage of this to get, to still have the team prepared for when they get to March by playing some tough competition in the non-conference, but also, give themselves a little bit of leeway to, sort of gain a little bit of momentum against some of these smaller opponents in the non-conference season, because they haven't really been able to do that a lot over the last few years. And I think that's part of why they have been on the bubble as often as they have, because coming into conference play, after having played the schedule that they have, this team feels mentally exhausted a little bit. And I think that leads to some of the struggles that Carolina's had.
Yeah, I think it'll be interested to see what happens. Hubert Davis wants to play a lot of games at home. He likes playing in the Smith Center. He likes affording his guys that opportunity to play in front of 22,000 fans as many times as possible. Was not a fan of the way the schedule fell this past year, where they played, I think, 6 games at home before they got into the ACC season. So, the Jumpman Invitational is no more. The CBS Sports Classic is under contract for, I believe, 1 more season, and that could be going away, and that could be freeing up more and more opportunities. Of course, the home and home with Kansas comes to an end when they visit Chapel Hill this November. So I'd like to see them at least find one premier opponent that they try to schedule a home and home with on an annual basis. In response to losing these two conference games. But I can't guarantee that they'll do that. Because a lot of what they're competing in this year outside of that Fort Myers Tip-Off Classic was already under contract. And was already decided upon, because if you go back and you listen to what he talked about going to Maui last year, if Hubert Davis had his choice, I don't think Carolina would have went to Maui. And it's why I think it's up in the air. Does Carolina continue to go to Maui? Do they go to the Battle for Atlantis when when that 4 years comes to an end? I honestly don't know. And maybe this makes it easier, the fact you have 2 less games against your conference, and some of your other contractual agreements are coming to an end with other events. But I'd like to see them still schedule the way that they typically schedule. Because when Carolina has had championship caliber teams, guess what they've done? They've handled their non-conference. Like 2 years ago, when you won an ACC regular season title, you were 8-3, and you had some tough losses. You lost to a UConn, you lost to a Kentucky, but you had some significant wins over at Tennessee, over in Oklahoma mixed in there as well. So this is going to be interesting to see what Carolina does moving forward. And really see what that schedule looks like as it comes together. Because in the old days, when you played 16 conference games and you had to fill out a 30-something game schedule, you had plenty of other games to add where you could get some confidence, figure out your rotation, but also get tested. That all kind of got compiled when you went to an 18-game conference schedule, let alone a 20-game conference schedule. Now it's back down to 18. Now you've got a little bit more control of what that balance looks like. And so hopefully they take the approach to put themselves up in the best position to A, stack wins, because you got to win games, B, make money, which means you're playing a lot more games at home, but C, preparing yourself and learning a lot about yourself by the time you get to conference play, so you're still not trying to figure out rotations and the such once you get into ACC competition. So, but all that is TBD. As the schedule continues to get finalized, we'll be here ready to talk about it once that does become officially official. In the meantime, that's going to wrap up this edition of the show. We'll encourage you to visit the website. That's HeelToughBlog.com. Full coverage of Devin Cambridge's can be found on there. That's the latest transfer portal target for Hubert Davis, Jim Tanner, and Carolina basketball. Any other news and notes out of the portal, we'll have you covered, as well as anything involving Drake Powell as he's at the NBA draft combine in Chicago starting later this week. Anthony has you covered all things Carolina football. Bill Belichick and his staff, they're still very busy in the portal, still very busy recruiting the high school prospects as well. So make sure you're checking the website every single day, whether it's morning, afternoon, and evening. There's still at least one article going up on the site covering those 2 programs. So get to the website every single day, HeelToughBlog.com, for the latest and the best Carolina basketball, Tar Heel football coverage. As for the podcast, you guys know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform, simply search the Four Corners Podcast and we'll pop up. There, we encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show throughout the remainder of the basketball off season. So with that, guys, it is going to wrap up this edition of the show. So thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.